Scripted Borders, the Partitions and Ensembles of Micronationhood. My research is invested in the study of micronations. Micronations are self-declared nation-states which are not recognized by any other nation. Each is an attempt by their ruler to secede from their host country, meaning most micronations are quite micro, with most occupying the space of their ruler's living room, backyard, house, or property. The 200 plus micronations in existence have a variety of origins. However, I would suggest that most micronations can be identified by one or more of these three functions. Number one, micronations that function as a type of community project. These micronations are an attempt to bring like-minded individuals together, often over the internet, and are usually quite playful. For example, the Arakan Empire, which is a tyrannical dictatorship that has a large digital following and claims territory in Montreal, Australia, and on Earth's moon. Number two, micronations meant to be completely satirical and poke fun at the structures of statehood. For example, Obsidia, whose land claim is only the size of a small rock, which is carried around in a briefcase. And number three, micronations in which the ruler legitimately hopes to secede from the former nation. Sometimes the reasons behind these declarations are deeply political or historical. For example, the Yidinji tribal nation, which is an indigenous Australian micronation led by indigenous activists. Or other times, these new states are simply an attempt to contravene the laws of their former nation. For example, Sealand, which was founded as a pirate radio station off the British coast. In all three of these categories, there appears to be a common structure, or what I call a common dramaturgy to micronations. Micronations become themselves and exist solely through performance. Since these small self-declared states do not command a militaristic hard power, micronations rely on performance to legitimize themselves. No matter how much they subvert and transgress upon the concept of their former nation, they continue to mimic the symbols and structure of state diplomacy in order to be recognized as nation going forward. Most micronations invent or rewrite histories and national narratives. They have flags, national flowers, foods, and anthems. They create passports, citizenship documents, medals of honor, and currency, establish entire constitutions with laws and rights for their citizens, and hold elections or plan their lines of succession. Many are represented at various international summits, including Microcon, Microfrancophonie, which is the gathering of French micronations, and the short-lived Micronation Olympics. The Microcon website outlines the dress code for their event, stating, "Spruce up your royal uniform with sashes, tiaras, and other regalia." The dictator of Molossia, which is a micronation enclaved by the state of Nevada, Kevin Baugh has said, "To be a micronationalist requires a chest full of medals." Each of these symbols, documents, or acts might be seen to be doubly mimetic. Each, of course, is meant to represent something of micronational importance, that is, of importance to the micronation, but at the same time, they represent and copy the tools, the symbols, documents, and acts of legitimate statehood. It is through a continued repetition of these mimetic acts that micronations sustain their legitimate existence. It's through the declaration and re-declaration of sovereignty, the performative utterance of "I claim this land, I found this nation, I draw these borders," that micronational practitioners script their countries into being. While Obsidia and the Arakan Empire, the rock in a box and the micronation on the moon, rely on an element of humor and parody, geographer Terry Moreau, one of the few micronational scholars, asks us to recognize that, quote, "This humor and irony must be understood as something not antonymic to serious representation, but a representational force in and of itself, an extension of the serious. Embedded within this playfulness is a serious critique of states, their bureaucracies, and the ritual pomp of their diplomacy." End quote. I believe that micronations speak directly to the theme of this conference, in that micronational performances might be seen to be both partitions and ensembles. They are at once bordered, isolated states created by physically partitioning a piece of land, as well as community-based ensembles which reach beyond their borders in order to locate citizens for their nation and to find recognition through intermicronational relations at events such as Microcon. And so, I offer this paper as an attempt to unpack the sometimes contradictory partitions and ensembles of micronationhood. As I prepare this paper in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, during a time of self-isolation, quarantines, and physical distancing, I am acutely aware of my bordered existence. The borders of my house, my room, my personal 6-foot space carry an immense importance for the safety of myself and for others. With designated waiting areas and circles to ensure physical distancing, the simple acts of grocery shopping or visiting a public park now present as a choreography of borders. It's clear that we are living in and moving through our own isolated states. So much so that a recent article on the front page of the Wall Street Journal invited readers to start their own micronation, stating, if COVID-19 has put the kibosh on your summer travel plans, why not form your own country? The article continues by detailing the, quote, hard time that micronations have had, quote, dealing with the pandemic. Travis McHenry, the Grand Duke of West Arctica, which is a micronation that claims the western half of Antarctica, he bemoans a disruption in shipments of West Arctican flags. Kevin Baugh of Molossia reiterates his commitment to strengthening Molossia's financial independence from the neighboring United States, and other micronations like Ladonia in Sweden closed their borders and during the height of the pandemic offered updates of their country's COVID numbers, usually or always 0. Since most micronations declare a land claim, whether in a populated country like Canada or over an unpopulated territory like Antarctica, Earth's moon, or a small rock, they echo the larger colonial project of drawing borders and asserting sovereignty and ownership over partitioned land. Their penchant for mimicking the imperial powers of early 20th century Europe by dressing as kings, queens, and emperors invites questions into the ethics of claiming territory and drawing new borders in countries already shaped and scarred by a history of colonialism. As they invent or rewrite national myths and narratives, they superimpose a new history over their site. It's in this superimposition that I see these acts of nationalism as a type of durational, repetitive, site-specific performance. In practice, site-specific theater often invites new readings of place, as narratives are superimposed on the landscape through performance. Performance scholar Mike Pearson calls this narrative the ghost, which for a short time possesses its host site. His colleague Michael Shanks would view this as a type of archaeological stratigraphy, a performance layered over top of site. I suggest that micronations might be seen to be this ghost, this stratigraphy of narratives, symbols, borders, and performances superimposed on place. I question to what extent this imposition of new narratives might be read as an oppressive or colonial exercise, since some micronational narratives ignore the previous histories of their sites. These self-made sites ignore the polyvocality of place. They ignore Dorian Massey's notion that places are woven together out of ongoing stories, or Tim Creswell's understanding of place as a collision of continuous narratives. While it might be playful and an inventive exercise to imagine and write a fictional mythology of Earth's moon, what does it mean for a micronational king, queen, or dictator to rewrite the history of a piece of Canada? These borders and the site they contain are of utmost importance to a micronation. Some enlist a border patrol, others stamp passports upon entry. Molossia, again in the middle of Nevada, even boasts a navy. While these acts are sometimes parodic and meant to expose the absurdity of borders, for instance, said navy is represented by a small inflatable dinghy, they continue to mimic the role of legitimate borders by protecting the nation and to some degree policing the movement of bodies. For example, as part of my research, I have applied to and received citizenship from 3 micronations. Upon acceptance, they presented me with a passport, a citizenship certificate, and an e-book of their nation's history. While there's certainly an element of humor and novelty in being a citizen of the western half of Antarctica, many micronationalists receive applications from individuals who, due to political crises or climate change, have been displaced from their home countries and legitimately hope to migrate to their micronation. In some instances, these micronational performances, these performances of legitimacy, appear so real and so factual that they deceive vulnerable populations. And while some micronationalists are transparent about this fact, for instance, the Queen of Ruritania states we can offer citizenship, but it comes without residency, others are not. This resonates with the widespread displacement of individuals occurring at the present moment, and demonstrates the imaginative power, the hope and the safety that even fake borders, imagined lines drawn on a map, can instill. While micronationalists build and perform borders, they are not isolationists. Integral to the performance of micronationhood is an element of community or of ensemble. Micronationalists reach beyond their borders to locate citizens for their nation and to find a recognition through diplomacy on the intermicronational stage. Ladonia, a micronation on the coast of Sweden, claims over 22,000 citizens around the world, a larger population than some member states of the UN. These individuals take pride in being a part of this community. They display Ladonian flags in their window, open Ladonian embassies in their home country, and during the last US Census, some Americans wrote Ladonian as their second nationality. The Ladonian Facebook page compiles pictures of citizens who have, quote, made the pilgrimage to the micronation. In this, micronations approach Benedict Anderson's definition of nation as a socially constructed, quote, imagined political community. Anderson writes, quote, imagined because the members of even the smallest nation will never know most of their fellow members, meet them, or even hear of them, yet in the minds of each lives the image of their communion. Through this imagined community, the performance of micronationhood expands. It expands beyond its borders and beyond its ruler. Citizens influence the performance. Some vote in democratic elections, others contribute to the narrative history of the nation. Through continued participation in the civic rituals of nationhood, through accepting that the performative utterances of I found this country, I claim this land, actually do something, citizens sustain the micronation and assist the state in performing its legitimacy. While micronations are often discussed as strange endeavors that make for an amusing article or a colorful coffee table book, I contend that in examining their practices through a performative lens, we can see them as, to quote Terry Moreau, an extension of the serious. My work in this area is only just beginning, and it's likely that this paper raises more questions than it answers, but I believe that in our world preoccupied with regionalism, protectionism, the building of walls, and the transgressions of borders, these micronational performances offer a vehicle, offer a representational force to unpack the structures of nation and question the borders, partitions, communities, and ensembles alive in the performance of nationhood.